Okay, cool. So the remote program was absolutely in response to the pandemic. So before the pandemic, we were just like any other repair program where we were holding roughly monthly events, 2-hour events, 80 to 120 people showed up, plus 35 to 45 volunteers. So obviously when the pandemic hits, you can't do that anymore. And so I just wanted to kind of go through some history of kind of how this happened. So when the pandemic hit, we obviously shut down the program for a while. And then we, at Columbia Springs, we had a very big parking lot, public parking lot, and it was a big loop. And so I thought, oh, well, that would be perfect for doing this. So we did a drive-through sharpening event only. And we had 3 different sharpening stations set up. And it was, everything was outdoors. And we had people, they had to pre-register. And then they showed up and I think we sharpened, I'm trying to say it was like 100 and some, 151, I think it was, knives and garden tools and things like that. So that was pretty successful, actually, given that, at that time, nothing was happening. And then this is a picture of a different, we actually did it with a heritage farm. They had some they have farm days, they call it, over the summer. And so we kind of did a similar thing with them as well. And that went pretty well. And then eventually, so about 8 months into the pandemic, I had the idea that oh, maybe we could do this with other things too, smaller things, and then have it be the kind of thing where it's not necessarily repaired right then and there, but obviously it's the remote repair program. So that's kind of how it all started. And then, and yeah, I think that first time it was literally like a card table, my laptop, and me sitting under the tree. And of course, masks and outdoors and all the stuff. And then eventually what happened was we were trying to get some adult facilities to work with us and do what I was calling at the time, and I still think this would be a wonderful idea, but it never went anywhere for some reason. But what I was wanting to call it was bulk repair, pickup and drop off. So a facility with say 100 residents or even 8 or whatever the number is could collect things from their people. And we had a little sheet that said, name and what the thing is and what it needs and all of this. And then it was just a little half sheet. And it was basically just the information that I needed in order to know who the thing belonged to. And we would just tape that to the thing, whether it be a toaster or a pair of pants or whatever the thing was. And so I sent out an email to my big contact email at the time and said, hey, we're looking for these adult facilities to try and try this program out with us. We have repair capacity. We have people who are sitting idle and they want to be helping. And, we're looking for some stuff to fix, essentially. And I didn't get any adult facilities, but what I did get was one of the contacts who was on that list at the time was my contact at the library system. So at the very bottom of the screen here, you say added FVRL, which for us is Fort Vancouver Regional Library. And then, so we just started working with one of their branches, and then eventually we added 3 more. And so we had 4 total branches, and the way that we picked them it was mostly based on location. So we were trying to kind of hit all the, the 4 corners of our county. And so we had one up in Battleground, if you know Southwest Washington, and then we had 3 that were kind of within county limits, but kind of it again 4 corners of the different places. So we added them, and they did. Let me go forward here. There we go. So this is what it eventually became. And the reason why I created this infographic is because we eventually got to the point where people were like, well, how come my thing isn't done yet? And it's because it takes us a while to get through all of these steps. That's why. And so I created this to try and, because I was saying it in words, and then I was like, I think people need to understand what all is involved here. And so this is kind of what it looked like. So obviously clients would take their stuff to the branches, we would go and pick up the stuff and bring it back to the workshop. And then it would be matched up to the database. And so we actually had pre-registration. So they would do that online. And that was one of the things that like was not 100% awesome. Like if the library system and our system could have shared info, it would have made things a lot easier. But as you probably have seen, whenever you're like, if you have an existing system and then you're trying to like, add data from another system, it like does not work well. So basically people had to sign up twice. They had to sign themselves up to a library branch drop-off event, and then they had to sign up their stuff with us. And so their stuff might be multiple things, like they might have to go through that process like 5 times or whatever, depending on what they were bringing. But then they only sign themselves up for one spot at a drop-off event. And we arbitrarily put a limit on it of 20 clients each time. And that never got to be too much of a problem. We did have like, there was like twice where it was like crazy busy and we had to do like multiple trips. But 20 seemed to be a pretty good number for us because of course not everyone shows up. They'll sign up for something and then just not show up. And then of course you always get a few people who show up and are not signed up for the thing. And so I don't think we ever turned anybody away, except I'm trying to say, I don't think we ever turned any stuff away either. There was, I remember this one like giant sprinkler that was like very difficult to transport, but we went ahead and did it. So, and we did put space constraints on the program though, that weren't a part of the original like event-based repair. So bicycles were the big one that we like basically just couldn't deal with during the, during the whole time that we did the remote program. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. We kind of basically just said like, try to think about like somebody taking this in their car. Like if you can get it in your car easily, then, and I remember our rule of thumb was easily carried by one person. So that was the kind of thing. And then, yeah, so stuff came back to the workshop. We would barcode it, gather all the information for it. And if they were pre-registered, then we already had the information. So we just needed to match it up. And then the fixers would come. We had 2 days where I was in the workshop for a 2-hour period, and the fixers knew that they could come and get all the stuff. And so they would either assign themselves to things, or I would assign them like, hey, you're going to take, these 3 toasters or these 2 KitchenAid mixers or whatever. And then they would take it home, repair in their own space at their own pace, and then bring it back to the stuff once it was fixed. And then basically just do the whole thing in reverse. And then what the library branches did is they treated it like it was, you can think of it like a book on hold. So, the client they would get they would get notification from the library system, hey, we have your stuff. And then they would go in during normal business hours, whenever the library branch was open, and say, hey, I'm here for my toaster or whatever the thing was. So that's kind of how that worked. And then the last thing that I wanted to share with you was just kind of like once we were up and running at 100% capacity, it was about 150, I would say between 120 and 150 items each month that we were repairing and returning. And then what the hidden benefits that I found were, I always said, more time, tools, expertise, and parts. So obviously I think most of these are fairly obvious, but like in the case of tools, we had one fixer who had this amazing workshop, and he's got drill presses and even aluminum casting and like all kinds of crazy things that or welding. He had different kinds of welding that he would do. And so there were things that we would not have been able to repair at an event-based repair type of thing that we were able to repair because we had more time and tools and expertise. And then parts. So if we had a bunch of KitchenAid mixers come in, we would have, usually on average, we probably have like 1 to 3 per week that would come in per month. And often those need a part. And so we had one fixer that would fix, he would always deal with all of the KitchenAid mixers that came in. And then we were able to, at that point, I was able to write back to the person, right? Because I know I have their email address, and say, hey, we can fix this for you, but you need to purchase the part, send it to me at work, and then I will get it to the fixer. We'll install the part for you, and then we'll return it back to you when it's fixed. And then the other thing that did, of course, is it bumped our repair rate. So we already had a very high repair rate. We're in the mid 80s usually, sometimes up to like high 80s, maybe low 90s. And then we were up to like 92 to 95% with the addition of the remote program. And then also in terms of equity. So where I worked, Columbia Springs is not on a public transport line. And so before the library branches came on, in order to take part in the program, you had to have mobility. You had to be able to bring your thing to us, and you had to be able to come and pick it back up from us, or have someone do that for you. So that's kind of the overview. Oh, I wanted to say one other thing. The other thing, as Cami and I were talking before we opened up the room, and I realized that the other benefit that this gave us was that, like I said, we had certain fixers who kind of worked on certain things, right? So we had like one guy that learned a whole bunch about clocks, and we had one guy that did all of our KitchenAid mixers. And so there were certain things that, I would always assign out to certain people. And then we started to build that knowledge base of like, okay, this is the thing that is probably wrong with this thing. If it's doing this behavior, this is probably what's wrong. And then, so we started to kind of build that knowledge base. And then another thing that we did is we implemented a Google Groups, so that when we did learn about something, and especially if there was like expertise sharing across fixers. So, if one person was stumped, we would always give it to my last chance guy. And then if the last chance guy worked it out, he would usually write it up. And so he'd say, this is what the original fixer tried. And those were all perfect troubleshooting steps. However, it was actually this other weird thing. And this is how I worked that out. And here was the fix to it. And now here it is. Here's a picture of it actually working or whatever. So hopefully that's helpful to you. Like I said, I kind of intended this as like a very general overview. I didn't take too long, I think. It took about 15 minutes to do the overview. And then I'm hoping that I can just answer any questions you might have. And we did use, I didn't say this, but we did use a barcode scanner to scan the stuff into the database. And then you can also use it for scanning. So I used it for the actual barcodes for the things themselves. And then I also used it for the library branch names and for the fixer names. And the nice thing about that is, rather than H would be the fixer name, and I added a space, and then I couldn't find the thing, and I was like, why is this not assigned to you? Like, I see that it's assigned to you, I can see it on my end. And because I have the extra space. And so the more you can do something like use a barcode scanner and have it be standardized, the less error prone it is. So I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen as well and scoot you guys back over here so I can see you. And then just feel free to unmute yourselves and let me know what questions you have for me.
Pico, I think you raised your hand. And
yeah, I've got to unmute myself, find the right button. So am I to understand that you've completely abandoned in-person repair clinics, and this is your method now for all time?
That's a fantastic question. And I meant to address it, so thank you. So I actually don't work where I used to work anymore. So in that way, yes. But the entire repair program is not functioning right now. But so as of, I think it was, I'm trying to say it was the beginning of this year, we brought back in-person repair events. And then what we did is, because we had found so many benefits of the remote program, we did a hybrid. So it was every other month. So, you know, it was, I think it was odd months were in person, and even, and so it was, and then the other really cool thing that that also did was, then when we were at an event where we had something that needed more time, tools, parts, or expertise, then we could just barcode it. And so, and then the other thing that happened with that, to take it like one step further, was our first event back, where there was a press release that went out. Our brand new congresswoman was showing up. She's like big into right to repair. So we had like a ton of people, and it was chaos. It was complete chaos. And so what we did is, I had this lovely volunteer. She's like the best volunteer you will ever have. And what she started doing is, she started figuring out where people were in line. And then if they were like really far back at the end of the line, she would go to them and say, do you want to just barcode this and pick it up when it's done? And so we ended up just proactively barcoding stuff, even if it was something simple, just to get people, just to kind of like bring down that chaos level a little bit of the live repair event. And then basically from then on out, it was, you had both options. So like if you got there and you didn't want to wait, you didn't want to like be there at the event, you could just barcode your stuff and be done. And then what part of the barcode is that we had a code, a 2-letter code for the branch that you wanted it returned to. And so, so you had, the way the barcodes worked is, they would say like A, B, G, and A would be appliance, and then BG would be battleground. So that would be the thing. And then it was just 4 random numbers. So it was like 9999 or whatever. And so that's the way I created the barcodes, but that allowed me to, you know, sort stuff and say like, okay, I want to see all the appliances that are going back to battleground, or I want to see basically all the stuff that is going back to battleground. I want to be able to like, you know, partition that, because when you have all the stuff in the workshop and you're trying to get it back, and you're, you know, trying to maximize like your efficiency for that trip, you want to make sure you've got like all the stuff that goes back to, excuse me, battleground. And battleground is I just happen to be one, but that's the best example in this case, because it's like, you know, a 40-minute drive from the workshop to the library branch. But yeah, so short answer is, we did both.
Yeah, I don't know. This seems like a system that you feel works well for you. It sounds rather complicated as you describe it, and I wonder whether there's other people around the country who've been approaching the whole repair cafe experience this way. I haven't heard of this before. I know that during COVID, various things were tried by people who weren't happy with just plain shutting down.
Right.
Yeah,
I would say Peter or oh my God, I just dropped your name from my Susie. Susie or Cami or Peter might be able to better answer that. I don't know of anybody that had a program that was as robust as ours. And you know, I didn't necessarily expect to keep it. It really was a pandemic response. It was like, well, I got to do something. But then, like I said, there were just so many hidden benefits of it that it got to the point where it was like, well, why wouldn't we do this? And like I said, too, that we were lucky in that the library branches that worked with us were all phenomenal. They were fabulous. I always say this, but like, I think libraries and librarians are a little bit magic.
The library branch
they've got like a little bit of
the library branch was simply supplying a space for you to work. Their library staff wasn't involved, were they?
They ran the drop-off events. So once a month, they would run a 1 hour drop-off event. So they had like a third or a half sheet from us that I created, that they would have the patrons fill out. And then they would like set up a table and set up one of those like Gaylords on wheels kind of thing. And so they would collect all the stuff for us.
Well,
so
that
in that way, they were
surprising. It is surprising that you've been able to talk library staff into taking on that extra job, because my experience has been, with small rural libraries, they're plenty busy as it is, but
yeah.
if it works, it works.
And we do have a really fabulous, the Fort Vancouver Regional Library District is fabulous. And I'm a little surprised myself. Also, when I very first started, I was handling all of the notifications that like, okay, your stuff is ready, come get it, right? And so I was still doing that even once we were working with the library branches, and they were like, you're telling people too quickly, like, don't do that. And I was like, oh, okay, that's fine. And they were like, we'll handle that part. And I was like, more power to you. Like, you want to do the notification? Fantastic. So yeah, we were, I mean, I didn't necessarily intend to leverage like all of that. But it, again, it was a bonus of it. It was like, well, if they're gonna like do the work for us, then, and we get to just have a fabulous relationship with them, then by all means.
Well, at our repair clinics, here in Kittitas County, Ellensburg is where we operate out of. Of course, we don't have the same kind of population base as most places on the west side of the state do. And, so chaos is usually not something we have to cope with. And it's certainly something we want to avoid. And normally at one of our in-person events, we'll have, say, 6 volunteers, and we'll have 20 people show up over the course of 4 hours.
So the scale is much different.
It's pretty different.
Yeah.
And I think different in a way that I'm thankful for, because your description of your whole record keeping system just kind of makes my head spin.
Yeah. Well, and I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you said that. So I know Elise is the person who called for this call. I just want to double check with Elise. I know you need to be somewhere else, Elise. Was there any questions that you had for me? Like, did you get what you needed out of this?
She's not listening.
Oh, yeah. Oh, guess she's done. Go ahead.
I was to say that I'm interested because one of the things basically my boss is working on is a repair innovation center based on the ones out in Washington. Dave Bennick is the consultant, and it's a contract with the county, so I'm not sure where it's going to go, but there's been discussion about having a repair shop, a repair cafe, and I wasn't sure how we were supposed to do that. I live an hour and a half away from this facility. Our fixers work during the week, so when I heard you mention this seems to me the best way to run a repair shop at a facility like that, not while you wait, but drop off and come back, and then it gets to the fixer. So I really wanted to hear about that. And this is a very technically naive question, but what do you need to do a barcode system? You just need like a barcode reader and is it a program? What?
Yeah. So I didn't know that either. And so it's I'm going to go back a tiny bit and tell you a little story. And that is there was a branch of UL, so Underwriters Laboratories, except they're just called UL these days. There was a branch of UL in Vancouver, a fairly big branch, a big campus. When I first started this job, they were shutting down, or they didn't fully shut down, but they downgraded to about 10% of their workforce. So they had this huge workshop, and they gave me free reign to take what I wanted from the workshop, which was amazing. And so one of the things that I collected, there we go. One of the things that I collected from that was a barcode scanner. And I had no idea how they worked, and I didn't know what I would ever use it for. And so then fast forward, like, 3.5 years or whatever it was, this thing's been clunking around my workshop. And I started thinking like, gosh, maybe that would be helpful to start to kind of like track this stuff. And so I Googled it, like, how do you create a barcode? And I found like some answer online, and then the barcode iterations kind of went through, like, there were like 3 or 4 different iterations of like how we ended up using them. So as I was telling you, like, we had, I think, 5 different, we had appliances. We did have bicycles, I think. I can't remember. Anyways, but we had the different categories of things, and then we had the branches that they should be returned to. And then it was just numbers, just random, like you could be 9,999 or whatever. And so and then you print them out. So you like create them in a spreadsheet, print them out, cut them up. And so we had little barcodes that were about this big, and then we just taped them onto the thing. And the barcode didn't necessarily, the numbers didn't mean anything except to be able to connect the thing to the fixer to the client. Like, we wanted that connection to be very clear. And where it needed to go back to, right? Because you have to be able to like track these things. And then you want to be able to track like who it belongs to and how to get in touch with them. And so I would say about 99% of our clients had email addresses. And for the ones that didn't, I would either collect like a phone number, although I did not like dealing in phone numbers, and that's just like that was just kind of like a data thing. I was like, I didn't really want, and I never collected like address because I didn't need it. It was like, what do I care? But yeah, so I think you have to look at it like, what is the data that we need to collect? And then how are we going to use that data, and how do we want to set up the database to serve that goal? And oh, sorry, the other thing I was gonna say, so you can think of a barcode scanner the exact same way you think of a mouse or a key or an external keyboard. It's just an input device. It's very, very simple. And it literally just like you put it has like a USB end, and you stick it into any laptop. I never had an issue with it connecting. And you stick it in the laptop, and then you can scan barcodes, and it will tell you exactly what the barcode says. And like I said, you can think of it just like a mouse. So you like use your mouse to get into the square that you want the barcode in, and then boop, and then it'll show up. It'll say ABG 0984 or whatever.
And just the information about printing it out. I was like, do you have to have
Yeah.
stickers? Do you have to have a special printers?
I mean, it would have been nice if they were stickers, to be honest, but it was like we were doing everything like super low key.
And I worry a sticker would damage a wood item. I was just thinking about that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and then the other thing we did do as well as we color coded them. So we color coded them based on branch. And that helped when if you're standing in the workshop and you've got a shelf full of stuff. Sometimes it helped to be like, okay, I'm looking for blue. I know I'm looking for blue. And then, sometimes it was like, we might've had 30 things that needed to be returned to the branch. And so, and then, so what we would usually do is like, it's helpful if it's a 2-person job. So if you have like somebody in that section, like reading stuff off, and then you can like check them off of a list. Or print it out ahead of time and check it off for yourself. And then the other thing that we did, which was weird, but like you learn these things, if you're going to do sharpening, a lot of sharpening things look the same as a lot of other sharpening things, right? Every set of giant clippers looks the same as every other set of giant clippers, especially if they don't belong to you, right? If they're somebody else's, they look the exact same as all the rest. So what we ended up doing, and we had like colored dots, and those wouldn't stick to the soft handles. We went through all this stuff, and what we ended up doing was we bought they're made for like little kids, and they're like they're hair ties, little teeny tiny hair ties. You get like a package of like 150 of them for 99 cents or whatever. And then we would color code all the stuff as it came in, as we were barcoding it. It was like, okay, these 5 items belong to Mary Smith and they're all blue. Because, and that was the other thing too, is when we had one sharpener that did all of our sharpening. So he would come and he'd collect, 45 sharpening items and go away with them. And then, but then he had different setups. So he had like, he had his knife setup, and then he had his scissors setup, and then he had limited space. So he'd have to like do all the knives and then all the scissors and then all of the tools. And so we had some, in the beginning, we had some close calls where we were like, oh, we're pretty sure this belongs to this person and that one belongs over here. And then so that's when we started using eventually we started using the hair ties, and the hair ties worked fabulously. Like I would definitely use hair ties again.
So I missed why, besides the barcode, the hair ties would be necessary. Did each item barcode,
because we weren't barcoding each item. Yeah, with the sharpening, you don't want to use up like you would use up all of your sharpening barcodes. So like, because we didn't set a limit either. We were like, nah, just bring it all. Like we're gonna eventually sharpen it for you anyways. We'd rather just like do it all at once. So sometimes people would bring like 12 items, and it was like, all right, cool, fine, whatever. It all counts for us, so we just went for it. So go ahead, Pico.
I don't mean my comments to be taken as criticism or somehow dismissing your MO here for doing remote repairs, but all I would say is that for our the way we have established our repair clinic, I think that we always felt from the start that a good bit of what we were doing was not simply fixing stuff, but also educating and enlightening people about their own ability to fix stuff.
Yeah.
And so from the very start, we always said, no, we don't take drop-offs. You really need to be here. You need to be involved. If it's only watching or holding a flashlight to light the project, or hold this wire, steady this mixer while I take the back off, kind of thing.
Right. But
often we have people that get pretty involved with repairs, and that includes, say, a lamp that needs a replacement switch. And also, you can go downtown to the hardware store and take this old one and show it to them, and they'll sell you a new one, and then you can come back and we'll install it while you're here, and then you take it away. So, my experience since 2018 is that the in-personness of our repair clinic is really a valuable thing to me. It's a kind of a social engagement, and I feel like I and also our other repair volunteers really get pretty involved with the educational aspect of it.
Yeah.
But it does mean, if you have a lot of people who are showing up to a repair clinic and they're standing in line and getting bored, then and you can't expand your facility, you can't find more repair volunteers, then I can see how there would be a temptation to expand into a kind of a you drop it off, we'll fix it and return it to you kind of a model. I can't see myself being all that interested in participating in that, because for me, I find it really enjoyable and valuable to interact with the people that bring things in to be repaired.
Yeah, that's fair. Cami has her hand raised, so I'm gonna go to Cami first.
Pico, you touched on some very key themes that we return to time and again and addressed a lot at the summit. And I will stand firm in this position that there is a model that's appropriate for every scenario. I think it really depends on what the goal of the group is. Is it to create social bonds? Is it to divert waste? Is it to instill critical thinking skills in the participants? Is it for attendees to become basically ambassadors for repair and reuse? What I do appreciate about the remote or the drop-off programs is that it touches on equity and inclusion in at least two ways. So one being something that you just mentioned, not just people standing in line and being bored, but the people who don't have the capacity to be in line, because they're working multiple jobs, or the event occurs at a time where they simply can't go. So being able to include those people in programs like this and help them get their things repaired. Also, this, I would say, to some degree touches on one of the topics that Terra brought to the table in one of our early sessions during the summit, which was, it's not just about neurodivergence, but people, especially on the fixer side, who they don't like working with people, let's say, but they really find
Yeah,
value
we have one of
in
those.
repairing. And it's a way for those people to participate and contribute to programs, as well as just like keep people involved who might otherwise not be able to contribute their skills to something like this, whether it's because of COVID, whether it's because they're very uncomfortable around people, whatever it might be. So I like this model because it just expands who can participate and how they can participate.
Yeah,
Well,
and so
it certainly gives me something to think about, because I really was not aware of anybody doing the remote drop off and return repair at all. And I mean, though, I will admit that I've taken stuff home and said, come back next month and pick it up. And usually people do. But that's really, it's not as though we have hard and fast policies against taking drop-offs and taking things away to some remote location and then returning them, but it's usually something we have tried to avoid, and for any number of reasons. One of them, or several of them, being kind of philosophical, and others of them being more practical, logistical concerns.
It was during COVID, and it was because we were doing a Zoom, and it was like a lesson. And so I gathered things, and I used my Buy Nothing group to look for jewelry, and I sourced a variety of jewelry, and then I fixed it on a Zoom, which was then attended live, but also shared afterwards. And so we're going to do that again. We want to start doing a series of Zoom workshops, and we'll share them widely, but to continue to help train. And so for us, that's a method to do it, to source things, have them drop them off, and then we fix them. But I agree with you. Generally, our model is absolutely social, in-person cafes. But I was very interested in this because of the concept of a repair cafe in this reuse center that we're hoping in the future. On site.
And I'm certain now that I'm going to mention this different repair model at our next board meeting. I know that there's at least one of our board members who's going to pounce on it and be wildly enthusiastic about it. And we'll see where we go with that.
Well, and Pico, I think it was you who said early on that this seems complicated, and it is. So don't let my flippant behavior or the way I'm talking about it downplay that. Like there's a different set of skills that go into the admin side and the logistics side of being on top of making sure that stuff gets back to where it belongs to. Right. And so, and that also was another thing I wrote down, is that, like, so before we had the remote program, occasionally a fixer would come to me during an event and they would say, hey, I really need to take this thing home with me. And I would basically have to say to them, I never had this conversation with you. And that never sat well with me, but it was like, that was the best thing I had to tell them at the time.
You mean
And
that
that
you
was-
were essentially saying, no, this is against our policy, don't do it?
Well, I wasn't, I was officially saying that, but I wasn't actually saying that. I was saying, I don't care what you do, but we never had this conversation. This, you know, because I wanted to see the thing get fixed too. And I, you know, I trusted my people, but I think that I think there are some things there that a lot of people don't think about, like liability, you know, having some random person come to your house, like, is this person a predator? We don't know. Like, there's a lot of things that I was like, I just don't feel comfortable having that be under the umbrella of my program or our program.
No,
And
but
so-
I'm not quite clear what you mean by that sort of thing. You mean specifically people taking repair projects home with them?
Right.
Oh,
Right.
Hmm.
And so as a female, I would not at all feel comfortable with some random person coming to my house.
oh, you
Even
mean
if I
then
had-
the
even if I
idea
had-
would be that some person would come and pick up an item at some other location? Oh,
Right.
no, that would seem like not
Well,
a good idea.
that's how, so before the remote program, before we had like a proper protocol and proper infrastructure, that's how we dealt with it, right? It was like, I don't know, like, you guys, if you guys want to work it out amongst yourselves, that's amongst you,
Yeah,
right? But I
no.
never loved that. I never loved that that was the answer that I had to give.
Right.
And then it magically went away, right? Because then I had this infrastructure where I was like, yeah, cool. You want to take it home with you? Great. That's one less thing I got to take back to the workshop and assign out to a fixer next Tuesday. You know, it was like, okay, this is cool. Like, this is done now. It's official. It's all, you know, I've got the client's information. I've got a branch that the client wants the thing to be returned to. I've got a fixer assigned to it. It's all on the up and up now.
It seems to me that, you know, once you start down the liability rat hole, there's no telling where you end up. We had kind of convinced ourselves that as long as we work for free, we really don't have to worry too much about that. The flip side of that, of course, is that everything works fine until it doesn't. And when it comes to litigation, it doesn't matter. Nothing matters. If somebody wants to file a complaint, bring you up on civil charges, sue you, there's not much you can do except make sure that you're essentially judgment proof, which is what we are, because we're all volunteer. We don't own anything. We don't really have much of a bank account. You know, we're there's not much blood to get out of that stone.
Right.
But
And that's another key difference, I would say, between our two programs, right? That's another scale difference in that, like, I was a full-time employee of a
Right.
nonprofit
Right.
organization.
It's very, very different.
Yeah,
Right.
and that organization was taking on liability
Right.
for, you know, for having a repair event. Now, did we
Right.
have them sign a liability waiver? Of course we did. Just like
No.
any repair group should. But again, it was, and that to me, it was like, that was outside of the liability waiver. Like, anytime where I was saying, or anytime where a fixer wanted to put in the extra work, and, you know, make sure that the fix happened. And, you know, again, it wasn't this kind of thing where, I mean, I think what you were saying was probably a smarter way to do it. And I just never thought of that, which was, yes, you can do it as long as you're only bringing it back, you know, to the thing. But often it was like the client and the fixer had already talked and they were like, I'll just bring it to you, you know, and it was like,
Yeah.
I mean, because you don't have any control at that point of what's happening in that interaction, right? And Susie also mentioned in the chat some like things going missing, or the person who it belonged to going missing, and then somebody being stuck with it. And then she also said, you know, people being taken advantage of for fixing at home, especially those who do the work for pay outside of the events.
Right.
So
Well,
yeah,
what I mean, the liability rat hole is one thing, and then it's also quite easy to get tied in knots over just the general worry over what if this, what if that, what if the other thing.
right.
And you know, it's not to say that one shouldn't think ahead and be cautious, but I guess I just feel really fortunate to be part of a group that's at a scale where we can be pretty kicked back about all that stuff.
Right.
And
Well,
anyway, one thing
and
I was curious about was about taking donations. Now, is that something that repair clinics generally do or often do? They just have a free will donation jar?
we did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You do?
I think,
How
and I think
about for
most of
being
so.
remote? How does that work?
So remote, it was problematic. I won't lie. It was a lot harder to do. We did have an online version of, giving a donation. But our donations definitely dropped.
Do you
Having said that,
depend quite a
again,
bit on donations?
what's that?
Do you depend quite a bit on donations?
No,
for
I was
funding?
about to say that. But at least for us, donations were like, it's a pittance given. I mean, if you're pitting it against having a full-time person, right? Like people are expensive.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I got
Yeah.
bills to pay. So no, I wouldn't. I could see donations being helpful for, volunteer run, volunteer only kind of thing. And
Right.
I'm imagining you spend donations on things like snacks or inventory, parts, tools, whatever the
No.
things are.
Our situation is that we are all volunteer.
Right.
And
Right.
we're fortunate enough to have a workspace that we can use for free.
Right.
So our monthly expenses are practically zero. I
Right.
mean, we have a post office box that costs more than anything else we do in a year.
Right.
And we do have a donation jar. And I believe it's true that an awful lot of people, unless they're in really straitened circumstances, feel a little bit uncomfortable about getting things fixed absolutely for free.
Yeah.
So in a way, the donation jar is a good thing to have, just so that if it's only a quarter or a dollar, just so people can make that little contribution as a token. But we have emptied the donation jar at the end of a 4-hour repair clinic, and there's be a $50 bill in there from somebody, we don't know who. And the fact is that because we are completely volunteer and have very hardly any overhead, we kind of end up often with a kind of an embarrassment of riches. We've actually been contributing some of our donations to other nonprofits, mostly food banks in the area, because we just start feeling uncomfortable about having hundreds of dollars in the bank.
We've sort of used
So
it to
it's just completely apples and oranges with what you're involved in. Yeah.
We've had a few group cafes where like the little bit of a kitty, the pot would then help the next cafe get a lamp parts kit together. We don't have a formal arrangement among all our cafes, but we have little groups that work together and do that. And it's, I would say, mostly to feed the fixers. So if you don't have fixers to feed because you're remote, that's like the big, and also advertise signs, physical signs. If you don't need those things, the money doesn't.
Well, and we had our big signs. We had a partnership with our city, and so they used because they had like big format printers for their engineering department, I'm trying to say. So they actually fixed, and they printed them, and then they were able to laminate them too, which was awesome. So there's definitely resources out there at whatever level. But I think we're kind of getting, I don't know what time it is.
Tara, I was going to ask, in wrapping up to some of Pico's questions about scale, if you were to make some recommendations for doing a remote program in a smaller scale format, what do you feel like could be stripped away and still create a process that's workable?
Oof, that's a really good question. I think if I had to do it on a smaller scale, I think I would think really clearly about what things could be what things could be easily repaired in a remote way, and or the flip side, right? Like, what are things that need more time, more tools, more parts, and more expertise. And then, like I said at the offset too, you have to have somebody you have to have some way of it could even just be a sheet of paper that has information on it. But you have to have some way to track, you know, who this thing belongs to and how it's going to get back to them. So yeah, but I could see, like, if you wanted to almost do what we did, where it was like a drop-off event, but it was like very targeted. It was very focused, right? It was like we only did sharpening that first time. And we didn't open it up to everything until I was ready to actually open it up to everything. So, could you potentially, if you had a fixer who was really interested in doing this thing, and they've got a little bit of space, could you set up something with them where they like just show up at the end of the thing and you've collected 5 toasters for them or whatever? I don't know. I'd have to think about it a little bit more. It's a fantastic question that I was not ready for. So hopefully I gave you something there.
Yeah,
But
it's
yeah,
good
I think it's interesting that we had this call and this discussion because, again, I was in it, right? And so, like, I saw every step of the way. And so to me, it doesn't seem that complicated, but like, even just going through this last hour, I'm like, oh yeah, it was kind of complicated. And you want to be really careful that you're not setting yourself up for like what happened to us, where we had 45 sharpening items come in and we were like, I hope we got these all back to the right people. Those are the kinds of things you want to try to avoid at the offset, and make sure that you were like, maybe even go a little bit like, a little bit past the extreme of, caution, to make sure that like you have that the stuff is all segregated and this thing goes back to this person. Because the worst thing that could happen, I would think, would be losing something. We always talk to people, and as I'm sure you all do, of like, we might break this worse than it's already broken. Like, that, right? So we at least had that conversation with people, and we did lose one thing. And it was when I was on vacation. So it wasn't me. But yeah, we only lost one thing, and I think we repaired, I think it was between 2,000 and 3,000 items in the 3 years that we ran it, or whatever it was. So I think that's pretty good, but like that's because there was a lot of admin that went into, staying on top of things. And, and that's not at all to say that that occasionally something didn't get to the wrong branch. The nice thing about that is that, again, we have a fabulous library system. They have an internal courier system. And so they often were like, it's fine, we'll just throw it in a box and get it to the right branch, so they were really fantastic. We absolutely could not have done what we did, especially not to the level that we did, had we not had such a fabulous library system to work with. So, and then just the fixers too, them being willing to like show up every week. And, kind of good things, bad things with that. The timing was Tuesdays and Thursdays from 10 to noon. So as from an equity standpoint, that's not great for people who are working, right? Now, most of our fixers were retired. And the way that I dealt with it is I just dealt with it on a personal level. So I would just actually go deliver things. So, if this fixer wanted to work on something, but they were working, I'd pull the 3 things and throw them in my car, and then I knew where people lived and I'd go drop it off at their porch or whatever. So, and I did a lot of that. So yeah.
glue work, not the actual adhesive, but the infrastructure.
Yeah.
It's so critical.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Cami, for giving us the platform and for recording it. Hopefully it's helpful to people. And I'm happy, like Susie, if you or Pico, if you guys have more questions, you can just reach out to me. Cami has my email
It's pretty
address.
remote for us. It's way off in the future. And obviously like there's this place in the Finger Lakes reuse that must do this. And one of our fixers actually says that he, in addition to fixing for a lot of our cafes, he does repair in the back of the Restore near him.
Oh, okay, yeah.
They have a model basically for this. So, and I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
there, so that's another interesting someone else
Yeah.
to.
And we did do a little bit of that as well. So unfortunately, as I said, I lost my job, but as I was like nearing the end, we had a very long standing relationship with a thrift store in our area. And what we would do is we would pull, often it was lamps, but occasionally it was other things too. So we would test all of their appliances one day a week. We'd send them like 2 or 3 fixers for 2 hours, test all the appliances that came in. And then if it was something that was broken, we would either upcycle it and like use it for our own, purposes, or harvest it, or, if we get it to work, then we would just take it back to the store and let them sell it. So we did a lot of that as well. And we were talking about working with our local Habitat store, but it didn't happen for reasons. But yeah, I think there's a lot of models there that, like there's stuff everywhere and it all needs fixing. One of the other things that we did was, and this has nothing to do with the remote program necessarily, but there's a durable medical equipment nonprofit in our area. And we found that fixing walkers was actually fairly easy because most of them are just like a bike tune-up, or very, very similar to a bike tune-up. And so we did that with adult facilities, and then we started working at the end, and my fixers still go there, which makes my heart warm, that they go in and they, again, like a 2-hour once a week thing, they go and kind of lend repair expertise to all the stuff that has come in, and cleaning.
Is in a home like that, and it's more upscale, but like the people they host us for free and people come down. We haven't had a walker yet, but I should mention that to them.
Yeah. And sometimes those facilities too will have like a donor closet or loaner closet. So the last big one that we did with an adult facility, it was a focused repair event. It was just walkers. I had 3 fixers, I think, that showed up to it. And we fixed 17 walkers, and 6 of those were the donor loaner closet ones. So, and I think it was the kind of thing where it was like they had I think they had 8, and then they ended up with 6 that worked because they had 8 that were all in like some level of disrepair. And so we were able to kind of like, cannibalize and swap things out, and you know how it goes.
Yeah, no, but that's really important that it be stable. So that's
yeah.
Okay.
Well, and walkers are heavy. They're like 29 pounds a piece, I think. So all right,
I've got to sign off. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
It's posted,
Thanks,
shared somehow.
okay, thanks, Cami, appreciate it. Bye, guys.
Thank you, Tara.